So give me an idea of how we could start playing with energy in our lives.
Yeah, I can give you a really concrete energy system that you can use right away. It's very similar to what we just talked about. So anytime you're going into a situation where you need to communicate, whether it's with your spouse or your business partner or your children, and you want to make sure that it goes really well, what I'd recommend is that you sit down. You can do this with your eyes closed or eyes open, and you just visualize that that person is in front of you. So it's not difficult. You just kind of imagine there's a movie screen out in front of you, and you just invite that person to show up on the screen, and then you just imagine that you're having a talk with them. And the reason I say imagine is not that it's not real, but because most people believe they can't do it. But if I say imagine it, then you think, okay, I can at least imagine that it's happening, right? And then just have the conversation that you want to have with the person, just from your spirit, your energy, to their spirit and their energy. And what you'll notice is that when you have this conversation, all the normal sort of noise and kind of BS that might happen in the physical world, that whole layer is gone. And it's very honest, it's very clear in the communication. So it's very fast. You can find out what the person is going to feel about the things that you're saying. But on this level, there's no judgment, so it's a very nice conversation. And what you'll find is then when you move into the actual conversation, it's like it's already happened. And I'll tell you a funny example, because this can be really powerful. This is many years ago. I was a software engineer, and I was going in for a review. And I really wanted a different job. I didn't want to keep doing what I was doing. And I wanted to get a big raise, which wouldn't fit with what I was doing. And so I just sat down about 10 minutes before my review, and I just tuned into my boss, and I told her, okay, I want to do something new, and it looks kind of like this. I just went through step by step. Here's the new job I'd like, and I'd like to make this much money doing it. All right, so very simple. This was maybe a 2-minute meditation that I did right before. And then I go into her office, and something so funny happened. So we came in, and she said, I had all this stuff prepared for your review, but right before you came in, I just had this idea, and I want to know what you think about it. I had this idea that maybe there's a new position that you could move into that's different than what you're doing now. And if you move into that position, I could give you more money than I'm giving you now because you've got more responsibility. And here's the kind of things I would want you to do. And she went down through the exact list that I had just told her in my mind as I was meditating and communicating with her. And so at that point, all I had to do is just say, that's a great idea, and just say yes and accept it. I didn't have to sell her on anything. And I've done this countless times. It's a very, very powerful technique, and everybody can do it because there's nothing tricky or complicated about it.
And I want to add one thing to that technique. I started experimenting with these techniques actually when I was a teenager. I learned about them from Jose Silva's work, Silva Mind Control, and particularly there was a book called The Silva Method on How to Get Help from Your Other Side by Jose Silva. And when I got one of my first jobs in sales, I had to sell technology to law firms. And some of you may have heard this story, but before I would get in the call, because obviously you couldn't close a enterprise sales call in one shot. Sometimes it would take multiple calls. After I had the initial call, before the second and the third call with that same lawyer, I would go into a zone where I would see them in front of me. I would set an intention that if this technology was going to be exactly what their firm needed, and it was going to add value to them, and they were going to have a positive ROI, the call was going to go flawlessly, and I would close. So I always came in with a statement. Now that statement I learned from Jose Silva, and the statement was, it must be best for everyone concerned. So I would command that if it was best for everyone concerned, for all parties, the sale would close. Very rapidly, with no prior sales training, I became the #1 salesperson in that organization out of 100. In certain months, I was #1 out of 100 as a closer. But I want to state how significant that was, because I wasn't full-time. Other people were full-time. They were working 40-hour weeks. I was working 20-hour weeks in sales. But I was able to do more closes than anyone else. And I remember going to my boss. Okay, so skeptical people, just listen to this. I remember going to my boss. His name was Dimitri. And he asked me, what is it that you're doing? And I go, I don't know. I think they call it ESP. And he goes, that's bullshit. That doesn't work. But whatever it is, keep doing it. So this stuff is really powerful.
Yeah, and you're right on that. I just kind of assume that it's in everybody's highest good. But that's a really good point. If you want to try use this technique to just manipulate the world to conform to something that you want that's not good for other people, it doesn't really work. You can get some benefit there, or you can tilt things a little bit, but remember what you're doing here is, I said energy is first, then the physical is second. So by the time, like when I was talking to my boss, just the fact that we were working together and there were next steps coming, there are possibilities that already exist out in the future. And so what I was doing is just noticing which of those possibilities do I want, and essentially I was voting for that before we even got together. I'm going to vote for what I want by putting my attention and intention into it. And so that makes it more powerful and more likely to happen. But if I just made something up randomly that wasn't actually in the kind of probability space, I'm not going to be able to, I can't just imagine something impossible and make it happen.